Welcome back.
Welcome back.
What are we going to be talking about today?
Today, I want to talk about the nature of unexpected events that take place in one's lives. But yeah, the nature of the unexpected. Yeah,
Mm, Bet you weren't expecting that. So I suppose we should always consider and leave space for the unexpected. Um, I think it's a tendency of many people to think that they can control every aspect of reality, that they can plan for every potentiality, but quite frankly, you can't. You know,
you can't, no matter how many planners you have.
Yeah, exactly. No matter how many sort of contingency plans and
5 year
business
plans.
forecast you sort of extend into the future, you are almost betting against God ultimately.
That's
Um,
true.
and there are certain, um, and when you really seriously confront that, this fact that the future will just happen how it happens, and that can align with what our ego desires, but it can also totally dissolve and crumble that sort of structure that we have. And I think we have to have a certain space to allow for all of that and to find a sense of peace, even if things are not going quite to your, comfortable
Personal
little plan,
plans. Yeah.
But like, how do you personally deal with unexpected things? Like, what's your conscious strategy for, you know, bring yourself to a state of peace and internal harmony whilst everything is,
Unfolding.
yeah, exactly.
I feel like it's very easy for me to do that because I have come to terms with acceptance of the nature of reality, which a lot of people fight against. So it's like you have to go with the flow, not against the flow. And it's a very good saying, but many people, what people don't understand about that is you have to sometimes sacrifice your desire to change something beyond what is happening. For example, let's say you're in a specific environment, but you want to go to some other place, and it's just not happening. But you have this deep desire to go to that place. But what we need to do is accept the fact that you are exactly where you need to be, and you will get to where you need to go as well. So I think it's faith, acceptance of reality, and just accepting that things are happening beyond your perception. There are many, many unseen forces that govern our lives. You can call it God's source consciousness or the universe or ascended masters or whatever name you want to call it. But there are certain things that always happen by itself, and it doesn't require our opposition, but it requires our acceptance and harmony.
Mm,
But yeah, I also feel like this desire to micromanage the universe comes from a egoic state of wanting. You want, it's like my will to thy will. That's actually on one of my oracle cards. I
mm,
pulled that card a few days ago, so it's personal experience really. But yeah, so it's just easier when you just let things be exactly the way they are sometimes, and trust that there will be something better coming along. Not everything requires a conscious action to move. um but yeah,
yeah,
surrender. That will be top notch advice. Just surrender.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think sort of to put what you said in similar but slightly different sort of terms, there is a distinction that people often speak about regarding um, more shamanic, perhaps more indigenous states of consciousness that have a certain reverence for the way of nature, and there's a comparison to that with a more of a colonialist kind of consciousness, or more of
Right.
a dominator ego, which wishes to impose a certain
Its own will.
will upon nature rather than one which respects the will of nature. A lot of the problems within the world can be boiled down to the sort of the ego wishing to um, conform nature to its will, to control, to regulate it, to force it into a certain ideal, and that nature naturally, by its very nature, it breaks out of any sort of pattern or sort of small scale sort of egoic aspiration. It will just do what it does, and
And it knows how to do that naturally.
yeah, exactly. And I feel that this sort of desire to control nature, um, it manifests on a large scale with human civilization, with the creation of all sorts of cities and disregard, polluting nature, polluting, the sky, the water, seeing
Yeah.
nature as separate to us.
And
Um,
abusing it.
Exactly, and a resource to be extracted. In economics, they will look at nature as a natural resource. They'll look at humans as human capital. It's very dehumanizing um, terminology, and as well a certain terminology, a perspective upon nature, which um, drains it of its sacred essence and just sees it in terms of purely economic terminology. Um, More indigenously and shamanically informed communities and cultures, they have a completely different sort of perspective of nature. They see it as fundamentally alive and as animated by spirits, unseen forces. Um, in the more Western sort of outlook, we have this total negligence of unseen forces. We only
Trust the scene.
Yeah, we only trust the seen. We only trust the scientific, the empirical, and we've become totally cut off from the deeper intelligences and the wisdom of nature and within ourselves. And as a result, we've become intensely neurotic. There is a profound mental health crisis, obviously, within the Western world. It seems that no matter how many things we get, we're never satisfied, no matter how luxurious, how many cars, how many houses, how many bigger TVs. It doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter for our well-being, because the problem is not out there in terms of not having enough. The problem's inside. Um, there's a fundamental dissatisfaction that people feel will be rectified by arranging the material world in just the right kind of way. Um, but you know a lots of sort of mindfulness meditative traditions will point you to see how the external world is a projection of your internal world
That's
very
true.
often. And there are people in far less well-off material circumstances who are far happier than certain people who have lots of material abundance, who seemingly would, um, by the material logic of happiness, would be very happy and content individuals, but they're not. They're not whole. And
Happiness isn't, I don't think happiness is an accumulation of commodity. I
yeah,
feel like happiness is frequency you can feel even without material things. I think the problem arises when people associate happiness with buying commodities. It's a fundamental problem.
yeah, and I feel
Happiness is not a commodity.
yeah, and to sort of um, to understand where this has come about, we have to look at the proliferation of advertisements, marketing.
Yes.
Um, there are lots of
The
the
conditioning.
the matrix, as people would call it. The matrix is a form of social organization and conditioning principles. The conditioning of people in order to have certain values, to have certain desires, to have certain wants, and many people from the adverts that they watch are conditioned into a state of craving that product. The principle is trying to sell you something, and to sell you something, you have to have a certain want, a desire,
To buy
a
it.
dream, aspiration. And advertisers are very well versed and knowledgeable with regards to consumer psychology, with regards to how to manipulate the senses in such a way to put you in a state where, I like that thing. Oh, that looks quite nice, and we have to really yeah, we if we want to be truly sovereign over our consciousness, our energies, and our desires, our sense perceptions, we have to um, acknowledge when we are being sold something, when someone is trying to make us want something, and whether that thing that they are trying to program us to want is something we really want. You know, we have to discover our deeper soul cravings, our deeper soul yearnings, not the frivolous stuff that has sort of just been.
Advertised.
Yeah, exactly. So it's yeah, it's almost like the matrix or the conventional society is actively trying to keep you asleep. It's actively trying to obscure you from finding a authentic internal happiness that is independent of the world by trying to keep your happiness dependent on certain products and services.
Make you
You know?
crippled
Yeah.
and keep you in a state of unaware, the unaware nature that happiness can exist as you are, where you are, whenever you want,
Mm,
without buying things.
mm,
It's crazy because that is literally the biggest gift humanity has right now, the ability to conceive happiness within yourself through so many means of expression. I think a lot of people also buy commodities as a distraction from themselves and how they want to feel. Same thing with binge eating as well. People eat their feelings, people buy their feelings because why do we have this intolerancy, this intolerant nature towards feeling our feelings? So I think the first fundamental of existing as a sane, happy human being is to be able to cultivate a space where you are fully being present with feeling all the feelings that you do feel, and not trying to eat it or buy it away, and encouraging a space where you are capable to hold a whole range of feelings, because as humans we don't just have one setting. We can't be happy all the time, as much as that sounds delightful, but obviously we have natural phases. But that's not, people fear that natural process, that natural cycle so much, but even nature has winter. I call it the human winter. The more denser feelings that one must feel regardless of how potent it is or how scary it is. But we all go through our seasons. But having your own garden where you have tools, you know what to do when winter comes, you know how to handle um, these particular potent feelings, is very useful, because then you can fully experience the whole spectrum of a human being, because that's what you're doing. You're a being that's just existing. And you have to be open to that if you want to live a life that's alive. A lot of people live lives, but they live it as a dead human being. Sometimes you may feel that you're around this person and they're just dead inside.
mm,
You must have heard that
yeah.
saying a lot, that they're just dead inside. There's no life to them. People walk around in flesh bodies, but there's alive people and there's dead people. So you need to do what keeps you alive inside. Not
Mm,
talking about drinking water or breathing oxygen. I'm talking about your soul being alive. I'm talking about creative expression. I'm talking about life force energy. But if we cultivate things that flow with our soul, we will be more alive.
mm, yeah. No, it's
People are not really motivated to live a life anymore.
I think
Yeah,
it's very taboo to acknowledge this fact, but it is. I feel it is becoming increasingly apparent to myself that a significant proportion of the human population are, as you describe, they are sort of
dead inside,
or dead or they're
dull.
dulled. Uh, they are sort of unconscious um, servants towards a system that is sort of keeping them almost like a slave, kind of. And part of keeping people in this sort of a slave mentality is to condition their consciousness in a particular way. And
With scarcity, especially.
yeah, with scarcity, and also um, to make them completely fixated upon material pursuits. Um, you know, the one way to do that is obviously to have a system that is keeps a lot of people in,
Nine
you
to
know,
five
yeah,
jobs.
9 to 5 jobs, poverty, financial scarcity, ensure that they can, you know, afford just enough to pay for the basic necessities of living, but not enough to, you know, be able to attain financial independence or stuff like that. You need to keep them working and slaving away and stuff like that, and you need to give them um, a sort of entertainment to distract them from the fact that their life lacks meaning. That they're in a very dulling and depressing job, and because a lot of jobs are like that, and the vast majority of people are like that, and you know they're probably in pain as a result of that, but they wish to, rather than being given a authentic cure for their pain, they're
Have
given
another numbing
distractions. You
substance.
know,
Yeah.
a lot of modern psychiatry, modern mental health treatment, um, they will just prescribe
A
a pill,
topical treatment.
yeah, a pill or something rather, very superficial cognitive behavioral therapy, rather than addressing the deep psychic longings within someone's mind, rather than addressing the core root of the trauma. There is a deep, or maybe a subtle emphasis upon just plastering over issues, just keeping someone continuing so they can work longer, they can continue to contribute to the system. Um, you know, it's pretty it's pretty gruesome when you really look at this sort of stuff, but you have to
It's
look at it.
enlightening.
It is enlightening. This is like,
Although
well,
gruesome, but it's
yeah, I
enlightening.
mean, what happened? What happened to the Buddha when he left his palace of luxuries? He confronted, suffering, death, disease, these sort of um, less appetizing aspects of reality, but they're real. They're there. Um, as much as a lot of depictions of contemporary spirituality as a kind of a I don't know, a kind of a neutered kind of version, which wishes to ignore these sorts of elements of reality, ignore
Bypass.
the
Yeah.
dark, just focus on,
The light.
individual bliss, individual transcendence, rather than pointing
Collective.
out issues in the collective, genuine suffering that is occurring, and saying this is not good. You know that most people's spirituality today seems to be much more
Self-centered.
self-observed,
Yeah.
ego-centered, focusing on individual bliss, individual alleviation of suffering, um, rather than giving something to the world. Most people want to be recipients of love rather than actually giving love.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
it's in giving love through your actions, your attention, the things that you value, your work. That's where um, yeah, it's through giving love that's where the real fruits of meaning are found, I feel.
That's true.
But yeah, it's yeah, it can be a scary place. There is a lot of stuff going on, unspeakable stuff, obviously, um, which many people don't have the mental or emotional capacity to um, seriously hold within their mind. But it's still there. We still have to acknowledge all the varying expressions of nature if we are truly and authentically interested in truth. Um, some people speak lip service to being oriented towards truth, but truth, but when the going gets tough, when they come to be shown a part of themselves or a part of reality that is deeply disturbing, they will shy away from it. A lot of people, they have a certain limit. It is a very rare kind of person who can hold every kind of frequency.
That's true.
You know,
That's
yeah,
confirmation. I
yeah,
don't know if you
exactly,
guys heard that, but there was a honk. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, we're reaching sort of the 20-minute mark, and I don't know if there's any sort of concluding remarks to impart to
I think
the listener.
to change the tone of our gruesome rant on the human experience
Mm,
and how grim it was, what we can do is we can be bundles of love instead of being like, oh, why did this person do this for me, or expecting, oh, expectations. It's
mm,
just, yeah, what we can do is instead of expecting someone to give you something, you can just give them what you can.
mm.
So on the last note, I would say is be a giver. Obviously, don't overdo it, because that's also a thing with kind people. We tend to go very, very far, but know your boundaries and give more than take.
Yeah. If you give to yourself, you'll by extension give to others.
That's true.
Um, you should love yourself first and foremost, and then the more you love yourself, the more you'll find yourself loving other people. Um, Many people may sort of pursue loving others as a compensation for a lack of
Loving
self love.
themselves also,
Um,
yeah.
um, but I think it's important to live simply, have a simple mind, have a silent mind. Um, don't have a mind that is tortured by expectations and thoughts and perceptions about other people. Because a lot of these perceptions, a lot of these rumination patterns that we have, where we're like, why did this person do this? Why did they do that? Does this person like me? All this sort of chatter. Um, it serves to distract us, and we get caught in our heads. A lot of mental suffering comes from being caught in our heads, and we become dissociated a little bit from life, and we're not participating in life fully. We're caught. Our attention is caught in ego-centered thought processes. So I guess sort of an important thing to contemplate is, what is my ego? You know, what does it have a tendency to think about? Uh, what are its general pitfalls? What are these sort of things that sort of drag me down into these worrying cycles? How can I sort of you know ensure that my ego feels respected, but knows that it isn't the sovereign governing factor in life? How can I dissolve the ego or integrate it? I feel like dissolving and integrating are the same thing, really. Um, how can we do that in a way that allows us to experience simple blisses with everyday things? Because I don't think happiness is found in a peak experience. It's found
No.
in the simple things, in everyday things, ordinary things. You got to find the extraordinary in the ordinary, I feel.
That's true.
But
Yeah. Yeah, I like
yeah,
that.
but I think we'll leave that there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Goodbye, everyone. Adios. There we go.